So, Julio, thank you very much for joining us today, and congratulations with the film. It
Thank you very
feels
much.
very. It's such a unique story, and I thought that perhaps um, that was something that kind of really enticed you to want to do it, because it was something that we've really kind of never seen before.
Yeah, I've been working with the writer David Hauptshine for a long time, sort of on and off, over the past 20 years, really, since we first met. And we decided that we wanted to make a film set in a hotel, which we could make, on a relatively low budget, but use the very limited sort of location and sort of, boundaries of a hotel to create the kind of stories that we're interested in telling, which are really, really sort of unusual journeys into sort of the outer reaches of the abnormal human imagination. So it's absolutely what attracted me to it, and it's kind of the area we like to work in. Yeah, so that absolutely yes.
Because I should say you've been working together for a long time, but you've worked predominantly in theatre. You've directed theatre a lot, and this is now
Yeah.
your directorial debut for a feature film.
Absolutely, yeah. This is the first film that I've made. It's a feature film, and we wanted to kind of try and bring some of the areas we've been working with in theatre and try and explore them. In a way that I thought they'd always been somewhat more suited to film anyway, and also not just more suited to film, but the kind of audiences that go to film, which I feel tend to be a bit more adventurous in many ways, certainly in that kind of area, which sort of move into sort of the horror genre and the sort of stroke sort of film noir mystery sort of areas of film. I thought it was particularly suited to that, and I sort of was very pleased to be doing it. Yeah.
Was there a little bit of I didn't know whether there was it reminded me of The Shining a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, there's a couple of things in it which, I mean, any film where you set in a hotel, you're going to be sort of like reminding people of The Shining, just because Kubrick, the way he explored that environment, it's so explored so brilliantly. Although the difference being The Shining, it's a really, really vast sort of space, with incredibly sort of wide corridors and huge sort of palatial rooms, whereas Country Hotels, partly because of the budget, but is set in a very sort of cramped, oppressive space where sort of the limits of the room, which do sort of shift somewhat during the film, but the limits of the room really are creating a sort of kind of pressure cooker, psychological pressure cooker environment. But it's a sort of unavoidably, you kind of enter the territory of films, like Shining and The Shining predominantly, and also the wallpaper in the film ended up sort of being actually sort of a weird sort of homage to the decor of The Shining somewhat. So there's that as well. But yeah, it's unavoidable, I think, when you're working out. But I sort of purposely haven't watched The Shining in years because I didn't want to sort of steal from it too much. So, but it happens anyway.
And I suppose because you come from theatre, you are used to working in a confined space and an area to work in. When this film is predominantly set in room 508, if our memory serves, if you're
Yeah.
working in
Yeah.
that sort of confined area, does that then allow you to be more experimental, creative, because you've got to find different camera angles and to keep the audience's attention?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you're saying there is something that obsessed me from, the word go, when we first started sort of breaking down the script, building the script and then sort of breaking it down. I was sort of relentlessly obsessed with not falling into the trap of creating a staged play. And I've been sort of, my father used to run a video shop. I've been watching films all my life. It's very much not that I sort of come from the rarefied atmosphere of theatre and then wanted to, put on a play set in one room where two people are having an interesting conversation about, some sort of political reality. The designing a film that was, even though it was in a handful of locations, was, very cinematically expressive. and just and experimental within that environment was really, really important to me. And so we spent a long time working on sort of camera style and camera sort of angle setup shots in order to keep the film moving along at a visual level. And so the film was speaking with a visual language to the audience. So the story was being told with a visual language to the audience. That was absolutely something that was on my mind at the script stage, in the preparation, the shooting stage, and also through to the edit and post-production was something that I was thinking about all the time. And it was a really good sort of, set of constrictions, set of rules placing on myself, where I thought I've got to tell the story cinematically. I can't fall into the trap of, filming a play, which would be just death to me. So I worked very hard at that. Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's successful or not for everyone else to decide.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the one thing story-wise that really kind of spoke to me is just how transient hotels are, and actually they're quite isolated places, and they make you feel quite isolated. Was that something that you wanted to tell as well through the story?
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to. Hotels in cinema and literature and music are very evocative, locations that have been used brilliantly, in The Shining, Barton Fink, all sorts of films. But we wanted to sort of really go into the area and the idea that when you go into a hotel, you're sort of entering as a sort of stranger into a strange land, and it's a very destabilizing, unusual sort of atmosphere which changes you as a person when you enter. And you're often dealing with people in that location who may not even be from the country that you're in. You may go to a hotel in America, and in this case, it may be run by East Europeans or Russians or whoever, because these people have set up this business. And so you're entering a very sort of surreal, potentially surreal world where, unless you sort of look out the window, you're not really sure where you are. And that was part of the decision, actually, to keep the film entirely within the hotel, to never even show any exteriors. We didn't even build a model of the hotel and shoot it from outside. There's one brief moment of exterior in the film, and that was really an idea to sort of create this alternate reality, and where the audience don't really know, is this just an unusual hotel, or the characters in some kind of weird purgatory? And likewise, you wake up in a hotel one morning, you don't know what went on the day before in that hotel room. If you've just entered it, you don't know what went on a week before. Someone maybe died, maybe people were having an affair, maybe someone went mad. It's this kind of weird, as you say, transient sort of existence that people have in hotels, and that hotel rooms themselves have as well. I mean, they're the central character of any hotel in a certain way. Absolutely.
Yeah, and what I found as well that I really enjoyed about the film was that it feels like a real actor's piece. Again, probably because you're so used to, they say theatre is very much an actor's medium and film is very much a director's medium. And here you've got the marriage of the two, where you really can focus on these very strong and kind of magnetic performances, really.
Yeah, we wanted. I don't know how it all happened in that sense. The film is sort of acted in quite a sort of, I wouldn't say it's an over-the-top style, but it's a very, it's a very sort of intense, it heightens style, certainly. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's partly my character, that when I sort of, choose actors and work with actors and then using the dialogue, we always sort of start here and then end up sort of getting sort of more and more and more sort of intense and heightened. And so, and that works really well for this kind of film, but it does create a very sort of heightened, unusual atmosphere. And just the nature of the story, the nature of the script really sort of demanded that, we got actors in there who were really going to, go fully into the parts and fully explore the outer reaches of them. And when they're required, as many of them do, to sort of lose it in one way or the other, I really encouraged and worked with people to sort of go as far as they could in that regard, always keeping a sort of, the directorial distance from them, so that, the audience can sort of step back and observe it, as well as being there with the character in a particular moment. But yeah, it's absolutely an actor's piece. There's quite a lot of characters in it, but everybody sort of gets a chance at one moment or another, I feel.
Yeah, and I mean, and it that the story is kind of like it's three separate stories all contained in this one room, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of we played around with the idea at first of having, you know, when we were first conceiving of the film, of maybe making a short film and then 3 short films, and then we came up with the idea of the outer structure skeleton of the piece sort of revolving around the hotel staff, who are a sort of mysterious group of people who speak an unknown, undecipherable language between each other most of the time, and then speak in a very sort of creative, surreal, broken English to the guests. And we sort of came up with that idea, and the more we sort of worked with it and worked with it, we thought an idea of really sort of not necessarily linking the stories sort of narratively together, but thematically building a world where you got a sense that this was a universe which, you know, is going to go on and on and on and on and on, and people are going to come into this hotel, things are going to happen to them, and they don't really leave. They disappear, they go crazy, some of them die, you know, things happen to these people, and at the center of it is this very mysterious room 508, which acts as a sort of central antagonist, central character that sort of silently sees everything and sort of draws people into its vortex. Yeah. And I sort of can't even conceive of it as a series of shorts anymore or anything like that. It feels all of a cinematic whole, but it's certainly unusual structure, absolutely, and conceived, you know, in the way an unusual project is sort of being conceived. If I make another film, it certainly won't be like this one, because I don't really know. It came about completely organically in terms of the structure.
And working with the actors, because they are at times in quite vulnerable mental places. How did you kind of work with the actors? You know, because you're kind of pushing their boundaries a bit as well, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to pick people who enjoy, you know, for want of a better word, enjoy going into those places. And some of them are, you know, almost there already. So that, you know, the actor who plays Vic Spencer, who comes in the final third, the sort of mysterious pimp character, you know, I've known him for a number of years as the writer. And he's just, I mean, he's not like that in real life, but he can access that at the drop of a hat. That's just him. And, you know, as soon as we decided, you know, he might be right for that, you know, he slotted right in. Other actors who I knew less well, I sort of worked with in the audition process, and sort of often over Skype, even though we weren't in the pandemic at all at that point, to you know, to sort of see, was it likely I could sort of get there with them. But if you've got people that have got affinity for the work, it's really just a case of, you know, noticing that they're going there already, just sort of like suggesting little ways to go there, and then pushing them further and further and further and further until you've both sort of entered this new realm together almost by accident. And that's something that's, you know, really enjoyable to do. But you have to have the right actors to start with, and all of them were, I think, even though again it's not something I think about when I'm auditioning or trying to cast people. I either know it because I know them, or I can just see implicitly they're my kind of people for this kind of work. And I would say, since you brought all that up, one of the things that's really, really important, I think, is for people to have a sophisticated sense of humor about all this, a sense of the absurd. And I think if people have a sense of the absurd, even about the most terrible things, you know, because in the film, someone, you know, trips over, bangs their head on a minibar and dies in the film. Just, you know, they trip on a stuffed panda. And that is, you know, it's tragic, it's horrible, but it's also, there's something very, very funny about it. You know, I mean, it could happen to me tomorrow, and I have to admit, it would be, there's an element that's funny about that. And if people have that sense of the absurd about it, and there's a very, very dark sense of humor, I think it really, really helps sort of going into those kind of places.
It helps.
Thank you for picking up on that. Yeah.
And I mean, the film is set in America, but did you shoot it there, or did you shoot it here?
No, we shot it in a warehouse in Essex. So it's the budget. The budget was, the cast is made up of people from all around the world, a lot of British actors, but some Americans, some people from Italy that I know, and then, you know, just the kind of people you meet in London who are from all over the world, really, you know, a guy from Russia. But we needed to find a place as close to London as possible for the cast and the crew to get to every day, but far out enough that we could afford to hire it, really, because is a low budget. This is a very low budget film. Although I happen to think it looks great, it's, you know, it was made for very little money, but it was a working warehouse of, like, had 10 staff members in the warehouse working alongside us, packing trainers and t-shirts while we were shooting. So we'd have to you know, sound a horn when we wanted to shoot, and they all come to a stop, and then we'd film. We'd shoot our, you know, 3 minutes of whatever it was, and then we'd sound another horn. They carry on packing their t-shirts and their trainers, and this went on for 3 weeks. And it's an arrangement we came to with a very enthusiastic, you know, company owner of who's, you know, involved in selling t-shirts and trainers and whatnot, and we all got on really, really well. But it was a fun experience.
And was it fun for you as well, that, you know, because when you're in theatre, you follow this kind of story linearly. Once you finished your shoot, then you've got to get into the edit suite. What was the process like for you, sitting there and collaborating with your editor and kind of really then condensing and making this film?
Well, it was a fantastic process. It was like diving into a well. And I probably don't want to talk about this too much, but I spent way too long, because it was kind of the way we'd set up the film. We didn't have anyone telling us, you've got to have it ready by such and such a date, or this is going to happen. You know, the money we got together, you know, there was no sort of end date on finishing. So we actually spent on and off a period of slightly over 2 years editing the film, and both of us just kept on challenging each other further and further and further to get more and more out of the material, and to keep on trying to get a really sort of trippy, hypnotic, oppressive rhythm to the whole piece. And, you know, using sort of quite you know, not sort of like an A B C D E F G editing structure, but sort of mixing around sort of you know, moments in order to create something that was continually sort of wrong-footing and destabilizing for the audience, and that was something that was absolutely fascinating to do. I loved doing it, and the only danger is that I felt really spoiled on this, that because there was no one telling us you've got to finish by such and such a date, you know, I really went berserk and, you know, drove everybody crazy and just went on and on and on and on and on with it. And obviously, you know, if and when I get to make a film again, that won't be a luxury, I'm sure, that I'll be able to do again. But yeah, it was an absolutely amazing process, which I really enjoyed. As with doing the sound mix and the score, and even the color grading was something that was an absolute joy as well. Yeah,
because they're all part of the puzzle that just help give it this whole polish, isn't it, really, and help deliver the kind of the final visual and I mean sound design as well. People don't realize how important it is until it's not there.
Absolutely, especially when the film is, you know, this film has got a lot of story, a lot of things happening, but it is primarily an atmospheric experience. You know, the atmosphere sells it, and because it's, you know, low budget, the more atmosphere the better, really, so that you're carried along with it, and especially because it's limited location. And so really, you know, things like the sound design, the score, tiny visual effects which sort of focus the audience's eye on what they should be looking at and not something over there, and, you know, the color grading, giving it kind of like an antique, otherworldly look, not a teak look, sorry, but like an antique look,
Yes.
is something that's really important. And you know, especially for a film like this, it isn't, you know, about, let's say, a police investigative movie or a movie with car chases, things like that. You know, you've really got limited things to play with to keep the audience's attention. And so, you know, all this world building stuff is really important, I think. Yeah.
And what is, but you know, particular I'm a filmmaker myself, and what I found particularly hard is when you're a creative and you put all your heart and soul and your passion into making this project, and it's finished and you're like, yes, I want to show it to an audience, then you have to enter into the world of business. and the money side of it and distribution. And could you talk to us a little bit about the experience that you've had with that, and any kind of challenges or any advice that you can give other independent filmmakers?
Oh, right. Yeah, sure. I mean, what I'd say is that, you know, I made this film completely stupidly with no sense of what would happen at the end of it. And people saying you should try and get someone like, you know, a name in the film. And I was like, yeah, I'll try. And I knew a few people who said they might do it and they couldn't do it. And I was like, yeah, it'll be fine. We just got to make the film. And I would say that coming out with something that's, especially if you've got, you know, if we've made a film that had, let's say, more gore in it, because it's a really, I think, creepy, unusual film, but it doesn't have lots of killing in it. And I think that
it's more psychological, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I think that if you're going to do something, you know, in a similar way that I did it, you know, you've got to sort of be prepared that people aren't going to immediately understand what you've done and go, yeah, that's great, that's fine, you know. And it's quite an objectionable film in many ways. There's lots of nudity, quite perverted sort of sex and stuff, and not everybody's gonna like that or appreciate it. You know, some people might, but a lot of people might be going, what the hell have you done, you know? And what I'd sort of say is that, you know, sort of this is undoubtedly a festival film, and its route, I believe, is through the festival route. But you've got to be really, really, really sort of persistent and, you know, relentless about it and not give up on that. It took me a long, I mean, the film is about to premiere at the Manchester Film Festival tomorrow on Friday. And it took a long, long time to sort of get there. And a lot of sort of, you know, rejection or just basically being ignored. And I totally understand that. I'm not, you know, bitter about it or anything like that. I sort of get it. But if you're going to make an indie film, I think you have to say, well, if I'm going to make a genre film, like a horror film or a crime film or something, then I think you know your route through things. And I think, you know, you can intelligently look at things and say, right, we're going to do this, and we're going to apply to these festivals, and these distributors might like it. And if you're going to just go out there and just do, you go to your imagination and say, right, this is what I'm going to present to the world, as we sort of did. I think you've got to be prepared for, you've got to find a way through things and find people, press agents, people that you've maybe networked with previously, and I'm a terrible networker, to sort of give you advice on, speak to this person, use this hook to get here. And I would recommend, if you haven't made a film before, I would recommend going to film festivals and seeing as many films as you can and understanding how that side of things works. And, I'm terrible at going up and speaking to people. I just can't do it a lot of the time. I won't do it, but it's really good if you can. And I would try and, get your face seen, because if people know who you are and then you send them your film, they're going to be more likely to say, yeah, well, I know this person, I know where they're coming from, I like them, I want to help them. And they're getting sent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of films, and they can't deal with it all. And a film like Country of Hotels, which is really, really unusual, if it's just coming anonymously from the internet somewhere on Film Freeway, it's quite a hard thing to sort of take in, And so I think you've got to be prepared, with your film, whether it be a short film or a feature film, to be very, very persistent about it. And I was persistent for a long time, and read up on how to write cover letters for film festivals and stuff like that. And I think it can be done, but it does take a lot of work. And persistence is absolutely the key, I'd say.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you very much indeed.